Hey kids, I hope you can see me. There we go. Now it's working. Okay. Whew. Sorry about the wait there. And I know that we're probably not going to draw any views tonight because of what's going on over at Shabby's, but I promised a show and I pushed it back because what he did was kind of a surprise. Um, but we got him to 1,000 subs in, you know, barely an hour. So I'm very, very happy about that. Um, So congratulations to him. Well deserved. Totally overdue. Um, Nothing but wishing success for him, and we're gonna have him on the show very soon because that's way overdue too. So there we go. So welcome to the Monday Night Grind. Today is Monday, March the 24th, 2025. Um, Bjorn says, I didn't know Shabby was doing a show. Yeah, it just kind of came up. To be honest, it kind of came up. And I just totally was reading everything wrong, and I thought he was going on after we were supposed to go live. So I'm like, oh, I'll go live, condense my thoughts, and then get everyone over to his thing. But he went live a half hour before we did. So he came on to kind of discuss his frustrations of not getting to 1,000 at this point. After everything he's done, seeing the chat so dense and everything, and I totally understand where he's coming from. But we were able to get him to 1,000 just by virtue of a few people checking to see if they were subscribed, and then a bunch of us, socialed out and stuff. And I took a couple of my alt accounts, which you guys know I have a couple, secondary channels and stuff like that, and I did my part as well. So I'm so happy that he's there. And thanks to all of you that are here. Of course, the aforementioned Bjorn, my lovely wife, Mr. Johnny Sorensen, and Mr. Bubba Hicks, if he's still here. I mean, it's late, I get it. So welcome. And certainly, I definitely, we have a show topic to discuss, which is nostalgia is something that happens to everybody. It's not a unique experience to any one generation. But if you came up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, specifically 80s and 90s nostalgia we're talking about, the question is, why has it got such a grip on us? And Boba Hicks earlier had made a chat that said that it used to be better. It always used to be better. I should know. I've always been here. And I only didn't bring that up because there's more of those going. Jamie, Dolls Not Drugs in the house. Hi! Good to see you, pal. Truly, it's been a long time. Thanks for being here. As I was saying before, a good buddy of the channel, Shabby Geek, is doing a live stream right now. It was kind of a surprise. He was talking about like the future of his channel and where things were going, because he's hoping to get to 1,000, and he's trying to formulate all these different ways to do it. And then we just got him there organically through the chat. So if the chat seems a bit thin, that's probably why, because a lot of our friends are over there, and all power to it. So, but I do want to get my thoughts out tonight on today's subject. So let's just go ahead and hop right in after two pieces of news. I don't do pre-order stuff anymore. I'm not doing that kind of thing. But this deal is so good, I needed to bring this up to people. So if for some reason you don't already have this, I think it would behoove you to get this at this price. The Talon Fighter for Origins is $13.88 right now. And if you already have one, just getting another one for parts is probably a good idea, to have like a second parapet or whatever you want. Definitely worth grabbing. I just wanted to call that out real quick. And that's that. I mean, that's really all there was to it. I wanted to throw that out there because I think it's such a killer deal. And no one talks about those deals all that often. Because there are deals, even Britannia misses stuff like that. And what'll happen is I cruise Amazon on and off throughout the day. And if something comes up, I certainly will earmark it, put it in the cart, tell people, whatever. But this is one of those things that I felt like, oh shit, as deals go, that's pretty fucking great. Because the Origins Talon Fighter is awesome. Even if it doesn't quite work with the Grayskull the way you'd like it to, it's still really nice. For $13 especially. I had to buy a second one back in November because my original one that I waited over a year to open had 2 right feet. I had to get another left foot. So I got that, and so now I have extra parts. So what I'll be doing with my second parapet is using it as part of, like, diorama and stuff like that. The other thing is just a miniature haul thing. You guys can see back there, I got a collector. The reason I have a collector now and I didn't before, the price, I was just like, it's readily available. I don't see that price being justified even for as big as it is, $40. Amazon had a flash sale, $20 over the weekend, so I nabbed it, and it's right back up in price. So I got lucky to get that at half price. But an easy thing to do is, if it's something you're going to buy on Amazon, for example, put it in your cart and save it for later, and you will get notifications if that price goes down and whatnot. All right. The other little haul is I got a vintage collection Yoda came in. He's been around for a while, and I've been waiting to find a deal for him, like right around retail. And of all places, Walmart.com came through. I got him for $16-17, and I'm like, yes, like I want a Yoda in both scales, and that being the Empire Strikes Back one, and he comes with it looks like the backpack, I think. Soft goods. Love this figure. Happy to have him. Just a little haul. Nothing huge. Because we already got these boxes back here, I was like, I'll just put the collector up there and let y'all see it. So, just catching up with chat here. People saying hello. Martin's here. Good to see you. Hola to you as well, my friend. Dalton says, hell of a deal. I agree. Well, says, I like to pre-order. The opportunity to pay for subscription shopping services don't yet exist. With that in mind, I'm doing a video this week on Club Grayskull and whether or not it's worth it. And spoilers, the answer is yes. I forgot that one of the benefits is you get early access to every figure they put out for Motu on Creations. And it was a very stress-free experience, knowing that there was a limited number of people, that everyone was limited to one. It's very cool. Very cool. So I think it's worth it just for that. In addition to the exclusive figures. So I'm going to talk about that in a video later this week. I still have to do the Lobo video. I still have to do... shit, I don't remember what the other one I was going to do. I'll figure it out. So... Melvor snatched up the deal on the collector also. Yeah, it just kind of happened. I just happened to be there and see that it was that deal. I was like, shit. So I grabbed it, because it's not... Bjorn says, snatched up the deal, but not your bags. Seriously, get your bags. And we... Whoa, shit! My fucking vape is going a little nuts right now. That's fucking nuts. That is not cool. Oh, shit! Fuck. Ow. Fuck. Ow. Batteries are burning on me. Whew. Okay. That's not cool. I thought it was my vape going off. That's what just happened just now. Well, time for a new charger. And these batteries are done. No more with these batteries at all. Hi, Honey, if you could bring me a couple paper towels, I'd appreciate that. Because we need to wrap these up and get these in the trash pronto. Yeah, everything's okay. Yeah, give me a couple paper towels, would you?
Need them wet.
No. All right, we're unplugging that charger. Time for a new charger. That was scary. I thought what I smelled was my vape going off out of turn. Look at that. Ugh. Got lucky there.
Yeah, these are throwing away.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, we have to throw the charger away now, too, because it's got burn marks on the fucking thing.
I'm sorry.
It's not your fault. I put them there.
I love you.
I love you, too. I'm glad the place didn't burn down.
Seriously.
Like, Jesus. Whew. That's scary. That's scary. Wow. That's really scary, actually. Anyway. Whew. You never know what's going to happen on a live stream. This is how you know it's really me and not Memorex, right? Whew. Holy hell, that scared the hell out of me. But he's like, the fuck? Yeah. And for those of you that are wondering, yes, I did unplug the battery charger as well. I will probably take a look at it later and see if it's really worth... it's clearly the battery that was the problem. But I'm scared to death. Whew. Joe DeBecky's here. Hi. Johnny blames Skeletor. Fair enough. For those of you just joining, there was a sizzly, bubbly, smoky thing that was happening, and I thought it was my vape depressing, like the button was depressing. I thought it was burning out the atomizer. No, it was a battery in the charger boiling. It could have exploded. I'm so happy I was in here when that happened. Just so we didn't get burned down. So I'm going to get a whole new charger as soon as we possibly can. We got a charger while we were in Oregon, as I recall. And it's in our bag. It's meant to be our travel charger. I'll probably just hook that up and use that in here, now that I'm thinking about it. Oy. Sorry about that. Did not intend for that to happen. So, we've been live for a while now. And I have yet to actually really delve into the topic, which I apologize for. Thank you to those of you that are here. Let's go ahead and get the show started proper. So the subject is nostalgia. And talking about why... Good night, Boba. Thanks for being here all the same, brother. Why nostalgia seems to hit people that grew up in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s more than any other generation. And I have a theory, and it's not just that our stuff was better, although I certainly have a bias to that, sure. I think there's a real reason behind it, because my dad grew up in the 50s and came up as an adult in the 60s and was really... and kind of hit his plateau in the 70s where he started having kids. His career was taking off and everything. So for him, growing up, was a lot of it was about cars and drag racing and doing well in school. Like, this was his whole life experience was wrapped around the things he was doing. And my mother as well, to a different degree. And that defined their life experiences. And both of them, without going to details that I don't feel are anyone's business, I think they both had reasons to kind of leave their childhoods behind them. They were both in households where they were lacking certain things. Different things, but there were certain things they lacked. And by the time they found each other and got married and had family, they kind of transcended the vast majority of those trappings. So I don't think that they necessarily wanted to remember a lot of that stuff. They didn't talk about it. My dad was not particularly open about his childhood, and my mother wasn't either. I learned most of what I learned about my folks' growing up was from my grandparents, and even they kind of told the same stories over and over again, right? So, but even so, it was all about the experiences of what they were doing, as opposed to pointing to a thing and saying this was part of my childhood or upbringing or whatever. When you get to the 60s, it's very much an experience time. You look at things like the civil rights movement here in the U.S. You look at things like Woodstock, JFK, all this stuff. These are all really, a lot of really poignant, significant historical events that happened that you can point to those things as events that occurred that you can point to. And we certainly have those in the 70s and 80s and 90s and certainly now. And I would argue that these days the events are kind of the thing that people kind of latch on to, which become memes and all this other stuff. But it's all intangible, right? So what makes the mid to late 70s, 80s, and 90s different? Well, we're going to get into that here in just a second here. Robert's Infinite Realms says, honestly, I think we're stuck in nostalgia because there are no new ideas for younger folk to grab onto. I think, personally, that's an excuse. Even if it's accurate. Okay? But I'll go into why. Because, there's going to be a lot of talk in here. And Robert wasn't the first one, clearly. Earlier in chat, Boba said the same thing, even as a half joke. But we feel that the properties that we're nostalgic for were better. And again, I think that that's arguable, and I'm not here to disparage that opinion or say that you're wrong. I just think there's more to it than that. So, essentially, it comes down to something what I feel is pretty simple. We were the first two generations, those of us, born and raised in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We were the first two generations that we were able to have physical ownership of the things that influenced our pop culture and influenced us. Okay? So, it didn't just start with Star Wars. I think it started really, really with Jaws. Jaws was kind of the first example of this where they really went over the top merchandising because of how big that movie was. No movie had ever been as big as Jaws had been. That was the first blockbuster, right? So with that comes the t-shirts, the games, and a little bit of toys, stuff like that. And there are people that only collect Jaws stuff now. There's a big community of people that are crazy about Jaws. And I love Jaws. Ask Lauren. Jaws is one of my absolute favorite movies for comfort. I'll just throw it on there. But I can't think of anything else. But I'm not that person, right? And again, we're not here to criticize anyone's collections or ideas or pop culture or none of that shit. That's not what this is about. But it starts there, gets bigger with Star Wars, and just leapfrogs in the stratosphere. T-shirts, games, books, posters, calendars, toys. And then you have a bunch of you see already that Hollywood understood that this merchandising thing was something that was going to be a part of pop culture moving forward. So I would say those two films in particular really took it to a level where everyone wanted a property like that. So now you were taking properties that you're putting out and you're making this kind of platform out of it. You're making it a pop culture event, okay? So, a lot of us, myself included, talk about how the newer stuff doesn't have the same kind of grit that grips people in the same way. And I think that comes from a lot of different places. And maybe I should do a different show as to why the later stuff doesn't seem to have this quite the same catch. And I'll come back to that. But it has never happened in history before. Vinyl albums were relatively new, even in the 70s. Less than 20 years old, barely 20 years old in terms of really being able to dig in with that stuff, right? So you could collect music, and then the 8-track hits. It becomes more portable, and then, cassette starts to hit, then becomes absolutely portable. Video cassettes come out for movies. You can record television events and hang on to the memories of that, and really own a piece of something that you really enjoyed, which had never been done before. Nothing quite like it existed. I mean, could you get 16 millimeter prints and stuff? Sure. My dad had some of that stuff. But it was never easy to get those things. He even said, the reason he didn't have more 16 mil stuff is because it was just so hard to get. There wasn't, a destination to get these things, right? So when the, VHS and Betamax come out, this is the first real instance of ownership for film. And then because so much of what we talk about with relation to television shows, cartoons, films, and the merchandising and toys and collectibles that come along with that, I think it all kind of links together. You also have to call out, especially in the States, the whole idea that you could now have half-hour-long commercials for these toys, which was not a thing you could do before. They changed the law. They changed the way that the country was run with regard to these things. So we were just getting bombarded with this stuff all the time. Some of it is timeless, and it's just wow. Some of it, if you look at it objectively, it's a shit piece of art. It's just not good. Or it's not related to the toy line at all, or vice versa. Or the toys aren't related to the cartoon, chicken or the egg, whatever come first. And that is what it is, right? But the memories are almost always better than going back and this and that. So I do think that we had so much going on, and there was a shared experience. With these shows and these toys. So me going to school, we'd all talk about the previous day's Transformers episode, or when Star Wars was a thing, everyone would come back to school from opening weekend. Did you see it? Did you see it? And it was a big thing, and that was kind of the playground and talking between classes, hanging out after school. That was our version of social media within our smaller communities. We kind of talked amongst ourselves. I have a vivid memory in middle school of being on the bus, and I can remember where in the route it happened. We were turning a corner when I had the revelation that Patrick Stewart should be Professor Xavier in our dream casting of an X-Men film, and this would have been, I don't know, 88, 89. So it's kind of funny to me that, I had that thought, and then sure enough, a decade later, that actually happened. I was like, oh, so perfect. And he's still the only person that has played, the elder Professor Xavier on film to great effect. I no shade to the other guy that played him for First Class. Great actor. But Patrick Stewart was the thing. And we had these talks. We had those debates. We had all the things that people have now on social media. We just did them on a smaller scale in person. Right? So, and then that creates more memories, right? I'm getting nostalgic about a discussion I had in person versus a social media thing I would have now that I'm going to forget later in that day, let alone, although I do have some memories from social media that are always going to stick with me, but nothing that is quite as visceral to me as the real life stuff that we used to have. And I think Kevin Smith movies tap into that, especially his earlier stuff. I really think that that's a big part of it, Gojatron weighing in. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're weighing in as well. says, I'm a 70s kid. Comics, cartoons, Miko, and related merchandise all fed my love for superheroes. What happened in the 80s was bigger and more deliberate, but nothing new for me. Exactly. And that's why we're kind of prefacing this with 70s, 80s, 90s, even though we're saying 80s and 90s. Absolutely spot on, as far as I'm concerned. So I think that there was a deliberate and coincidental push for ownership of things. You know, the 80s were a decade of excess. And then the 90s were a decade of excessive expression of things that already existed. So like that's where you get your extreme, like all the Doritos and Mountain Dew crap. You know, that whole thing. Neon colors and fucking more slime than the 80s and all this crazy shit. You know, the 90s just took that and went a little bit further. A bit more fast-paced, a bit more in your face, a bit more colorful. But also there's some brilliant stuff that come out of the 90s. So I'm never going to sit here and say, that one is lesser than the other. Even though I'm not really a 90s kid, there's a lot of 90s stuff I came around. Hey, Mr. B, good to see you. We're talking about nostalgia and why the 80s and 70s, 80s, and 90s kind of stick together like glue. And other decades drool, if you will. But I think that's the core point of it. That it kind of got pushed in our face in a different way, right? And now, although I will agree that there's far less original ideas these days, but I also feel like there's two things to remember. We live in an all-digital world now versus a hybrid of analog digital in the 90s and then still analog in the 80s and certainly the 70s. TV was still destination TV until well into the early part of the century when DVRs became the norm rather than the exception. So you formed memories around things because there was more of an event to something. You know, people remember fondly like the Monday Night Wars between WCW and WWE because it was something you did live. You watched it live. You know, like for example, after this show, Laura and I are going to have dinner, and we're going to come back here and try to get some work done on the toy room while listening to Raw that happened earlier today because it was in Europe. Normally we would watch it live to do that, but you know, because it's in Europe, we don't have that option. But that's one of the few things that still have that live feel to them, even if it's a more manufactured wrestling product than it has been in the past, in my opinion. So it's like my point here is that it isn't just about the ideas being better or worse. It's that on top of it, the way we experience those ideas is totally different. Virtually anything that you've ever watched or wanted to watch, you can get, whether it be physical media or digital or streaming or a combination of those things. So with there being, without exaggeration, millions of things at any given time that you could choose to watch or do, which again brings me back to saying thank you. There's a lot you could be doing with your time right now. Thank you for being here. I think it's harder for people to have that shared experience. When a lot of us, if not most of us, were growing up, there were 3 channels, maybe 4. You know, if you're lucky on the lower dial, you'd have 2 or 3 if you're lucky. So you know, I never lived in a place that had more than 6 channels over broadcast, and then cable was even much, much smaller then. So I think there's just so much bandwidth now being taken up by so many different entities and properties and things. So it's kind of, things are kind of lumped together. So you don't have people that are just, say, Dateline fans. They're true crime fans because they watch every little thing in different corners of the true crime thing. That's a whole fandom. Just like there's less of a, even for those of us that are older, you know, it's less about only Motu collectors or only Star Wars collectors. Like, we all just kind of congregate together because it makes more sense. So I really feel like there's too much going on, and of what is going on, certainly there's not a lot of original stuff for kids to latch onto. But even if there were, even if all the ideas coming out were new and awesome, having it be a shared cultural experience is that much less common. And even when it does happen, it tends to last for less time. You know, like Squid Games was all anyone could talk about when it first came out for a little while. And then it kind of went away. You know, and Walking Dead was a thing that sustained a popularity. And it was on a main channel, right? But even as I was fully aware of it, I did not participate. I binge watched it a couple months back. And I enjoyed that experience. I love that show. But I didn't share the experience when it was brand new. Same thing happened to me with Battlestar Galactica, right? So I do feel like the playing field is different. You know, I don't think it's fair for us to judge apples and oranges in that sense, in terms of quality, because the mechanisms of how these things are delivered to us and the way that the culture operates these days is completely different. So even if there's a brilliant new property that should have kind of taken over kids for a while, a lot of them aren't going to know about it because their parents just turn on Bluey on repeat forever. You know what I mean? It just doesn't exist anymore. And, you know, like, I'll use Final Faction as an example. Super mega affordable toy line that had a decent, if not great, YouTube series that you could watch to get the backstory on. And you could get the whole line. You know, you can get entire waves for less than $20. And then they had a comic that fell flat. But they tried. They really tried to bring back that idea of 80s and 90s stuff. And power to them for doing that. Because I love that line. Y'all know I love that line. A lot of you love it too. They tried to make it something, and it certainly resonated for us adult collectors. But I've never met a kid that was like, "Ooh, do you have Final Faction?" Never met one. Not that I'm going out meeting a lot of kids anyway, but you get my drift. You get my point. So I think that it's valid, but also a little bit unfair to compare the two directly. You know, what we experience versus what other people are experiencing. And when there's 12 lanes of traffic instead of 2, there are so many different choices and so many different combinations of things people like, right? And I think that reflects everything. Why more people feel isolated, why more people feel like they're alone in their experience, why they feel more separated than ever. And I think that is a huge part of everything that's happened in Western culture since the age of the internet and streaming and all this other stuff. Goji says, agreed, older cartoons were so popular because we had limited viewing choices. Today, everything gets lost in the behemoth that has become content. Completely agree. Robert's Infinite Realm says, the ideas aren't as good as they were back then, quote-unquote. WrestleMania is looking rough this year. I mean, you're not wrong. And again, it comes down to saturation. There's like triple the amount of wrestlers on the roster as there were back then, too. So keeping storylines cohesive and whatever, it's a whole thing. Dolls Not Drugs says, I'm not sure Stranger Things would have hooked me in if it was based in today's timeline. I agree. But it kicked in on that nostalgia. Bjorn says, I think a lot of people don't give certain new ideas a chance before crapping on it. I think that's probably true, too. I think all of that is true to a degree. Because it's just different now, unfortunately. Bjorn says, I probably spend more time looking for a show to watch than I do actually watching said show. I feel that one pretty hard. You know, Laura and I have gotten into kind of a cycle. There's certain types of things that we'll watch. We kind of cycle through them. And we're building towards, we want to make this schedule like it's TV back when we were kids. So like on this day at this time we watch this, and at this day on this time we watch that. We're gonna get there. That's gonna be not just things that are new to us or the things that we're sharing with the other, but also stuff we've watched and want to rewatch. So we're not binging everything. We're gonna try and get there, but it's a battle in and of itself because the algorithms are just fucking our attention span to hell. Robert's Infinite Realm says, I think Final Faction was about a decade too late. Probably right. Toy companies had abandoned kids by the time it hit. Agreed. To a certain degree. Martin says it's all getting more accessible. You can watch or buy whatever, whenever, and that was just not the case back in the 80s. It's true. So basically everything was an event, and often you missed out. It never came back. 100%. Great example of that was the Star Wars Christmas special. Right? Giraffe says, do kids even bring in fads of their time to school? Yeah, it's all on their iPads. Remember things like Garbage Pail Kids, Hot Wheels, Spin Just, having a moment in grade school. I think that Pokemon cards, and even to a lesser degree, Yu-Gi-Oh! Still pretty big, apparently. Pokemon Go as a mobile app. So I think the way in which they experience these things is very similar. But it's different. Like, they're experiencing similar things, but in a totally different way. But I think the physicality of it, that personal ownership of something you like or an interest is different now. Gotatron, with a great point, says comics were also a legit part of the old equation. Today, even the adult audience is leaving comics, and kids left a long time ago. That's a hard reality to face, but it's 100% true. I remember a comic book day. I haven't bought a comic, and I can't remember how long, unless it was a back issue of something I already liked. The last new comic that I bought was probably a Valaverse comic. And I have a couple of those I need to get back. They've gone to that trade paperback. I need to just get that and be done with it. And digital access to comics, like, it's nice to be able to access them, but it's just not the same. And eventually I'll probably go back into comic collecting. But that's going to be a long time down the road, and by then, who knows if it's even going to be something that's accessible. Martin also says, on the other hand, if you did participate in that movie or that live show or that toy sale, created a unique and unforgettable impression. Yes, that participation in the event, that idea. Like, I talk about Brainiac all the time. Like, the superpowers, like those couple figures that were like the stragglers, if you will, right? And I remember vividly getting those toys. And then certain toys that you look forward, you find them when you're a kid especially, or first time discovering something. All of those are experiences. I didn't say a notification went off on my phone, like, oh, look what this is coming. It's totally different. Lauren says, Daredevil! Probably meaning that we have totally caught up as a family on Daredevil and the Punisher and that whole Netflix saga. And we binged the first 4 episodes of Born Again the other day. And so we're caught up, and we're really looking forward to watching them as they come out. So that's our new thing. I love it. And by the way, I love Daredevil Born Again. I have some criticisms, but they're not too horrible. I'm enjoying the shit out of what we've watched so far. Johnny says, my new shows this year are Bionic Man, Hulk, and Bionic Woman, as I've not seen 90% of them. Fair enough, and those are good ones to watch kind of together, because they're all of an era. Johnny also says that I'm a daredevil because I nearly exploded. Yeah, that would have been bad. Would have been real bad. I'm so grateful I was here. Joe says the hype up to the Star Wars Christmas special was epic, and then it aired, and it was there for Boba Fett. Right. It's something that was like so... It was a cultural event. It was like, it was the next thing Star Wars. And it was such a, like, what? What's going on here? Why is B. Arthur singing? Jumpy McClunky's here. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate that. Joe DeBecky also says that comics used to be bought with a small allowance or the change in your pockets. Now it's a chunk of a paycheck. You punched out of the monthlies in 2012. Yeah. I remember when a comic was like 50 cents. I remember when it went up to 75 cents. I remember when it went up to $1 and $1.25 and going like, what the fuck? Like, they're good, but they're not that good. And Giraffe says, oh yeah, I remember mowing lawns, washing cars, putting weekly allowance towards comics, candy, arcade games. 7-Eleven ruled. I did similar things, but where we lived, usually it was not within the bike riding territory that I was allowed to go to a 7-Eleven. So I would have to wait to go to like a store or something with my folks to get those things. So I tended to plan out my purchases a bit more. But every once in a while, if we were out and about, yeah, I'd get a comic here, a comic there. And that's how it starts. That's how all of this starts, right? And, but I do think that the experiences and the way those experiences happen, because as children, as teenagers, life moved slower. There were less options to experience that were appropriate for your age range or what have you. Connectivity to one another was very much rooted in in-person interactions. Like, people, you typically had one phone line in the house, and if you had an older sibling or a parent who was on the phone a lot, like, you weren't going to get on the phone. And no one was interested in talking on the phone a lot when we were kids. It was like, hey, can you play? Yeah, I'll be right there. Boom. And that was it. So although I feel enriched for the experiences that I had as a child, and I feel that there was probably a higher quality to those experiences by virtue of most of it being in person, I'm hesitant to think that if someone likes something if there's a person out there that was born in the late 90s, early 2000s or whatever generation you want to call that, doesn't matter, that likes a thing as much as I like Star Wars or Spider-Man or Godzilla, power to them. And I don't necessarily agree that they have less quality. So, like, Lord of the Rings was a big one. Huge. And then certainly Harry Potter at the same time. Gigantic. And it was the first inkling to me of like, oh, this is what my dad probably felt when I was growing up and telling him all about all these things I thought were really cool. Now, granted, I consider myself a bit of a Harry Potter fan now. I finally finished the movie. I'm like, oh, now I get it. Okay, cool. Now, am I ever going to get like a Harry Potter t-shirt and wear the way I wear this stuff? Probably not. But I enjoy the Harry Potter lore. I've always liked the Lord of the Rings stuff. The books were something I always meant to get around to, but never did. The movies come out, fucking loved them. Love the extended editions, awesome. So I kind of feel like there have been opportunities. Then even the MCU, y'all can bitch and moan all you want about the MCU. All you want. But the fact of the matter is that it really got its hooks into kids. It really did. There's a lot of kids that really got into it. Sequel trilogy got kids into Star Wars. There's a lot of new Star Wars fans, a lot of new Marvel fans because of those things. Even to a lesser degree, the DC stuff, right? Even if those aren't as valid to us as the stuff we grew up with, or they're not to the quality we'd like to see as adults that are fans of these properties, they are hooking some people in. But it's still not the same kind of really hooked in, because they get that, they like that, they enjoy it, but then they're barraged by another 50, 60, 70 things that we were never going to get put in front of us, right? So I think that everything that we regard as this huge event, to them is just by virtue smaller. I think that the experiences have just become a smaller part of their lives, a smaller part of that conversation. And while that's a shame, I don't think it's any one person's fault or any one entity or even Hollywood's fault. It's just the way culture has shifted. And I feel like some people might be missing out on more enriching life experiences. Because it comes around, right? So a lot of these younger people that didn't have the same attachment to pop culture that we have attachment to pop culture, whether it's the same pop culture items or not. They do tend to spend money and time on life experiences, traveling, doing things, seeing things. But they also waste half of that time taking selfies for Instagram or TikTok or whatever. So I think it's all relative in that sense as well. Joe Becky used to get old comics in a U-Totem back in '79. Was always short on money, and the manager just always let me take the books. That's awesome. That's really cool. Martin says, I remember my grandma completely freaking out whenever I connected my dial-in modem to his Commodore 64 to look at BTX pages when she couldn't do calls. Yeah, that's going back a ways. You know, that's some War Games shit right there. Would you like to play a game? Of course. So for me, that's really the argument that I had to present, guys. That it's not just about the perceived quality or lack thereof. It's not just about a lack of new ideas or a perceived lack of new ideas. I think it goes a lot further than that. And it is a much larger cultural shift that we don't often think about in the context of comparing this to that. Just like I think that, if my parents were around, they would probably talk to me about the fact that, like, if they grabbed all the toys they ever had as kids, it would not fill a room like this. They just didn't have as many toys to choose from. And they hung on to the toys they had. The toys they had were more durable, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, Bill, I know that's Rolo. Yeah, we established that a stream or two ago. But it's right in the name. So, Johnny says, I like to travel to exotic, dangerous locations, and that's why I stay home and play Tomb Raider. There you go. I mean, that is itself a whole other thing. You've been lurking? Fair enough. We love lurkers here. We do. Appreciate that. But I feel like that all phenomenons change over time. And, there was a comment earlier where someone's dad was nostalgic for Flash Gordon when he saw Star Wars. Well, that was George Lucas's point of view. That was something he did. It was an homage to the Flash Gordon idea, right? He was the first one to admit it. And because he couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, so he made Star Wars. Just like, and this is going to be funny to some of you guys, but Zack Snyder couldn't get his hands on a Star Wars movie, so he made his own Star Wars-esque thing. And it was horrible, but he tried, so like, he was trying to come up with something new that was inspired by something he loved when he grew up, right? So you have that in Star Wars, but then that begat something that was almost the same thing. Like, this is supposed to be this. And not a lot of people seem to like it, despite them shoving it down our throats. So it's, there's no way to replicate the past. We're not going to see cultural events in the same way ever again. And that is what it is. Because whether we talk about the sheer number of things that are out there, whether or not the quality is debatable, but I think that even if you had the best possible quality and people's eyes were on it, they're just trained to like things and latch onto them for not as hard for less time. And then move on to the next thing or the next meme or the next news cycle or whatever. And I think that if we look at culture and feel that it is of a lesser quality than what we came up with, I think it's that lesser quality for everybody and not just the children of now. I think it's lesser quality for everybody. Because the forming memories is that much harder because there's just so much to experience. Martin says, just trying to be with you guys as much as I can and now organized a recharge for data on Monday and Friday so you can be present. Appreciate that. And that's another reason why you're nostalgic. Fair enough. Completely understood. And it's good to hear from you. It's good to know that you're, well. Robert's Infinite Realm says, you misunderstood me. Okay. Said, my dad would watch reruns of Flash Gordon on PBS, and I was watching Star Wars. There were more he watched, but most won't know what I'm talking about. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, but my point, I think my point stands. I apologize for paraphrasing you incorrectly. But I will say flat out that the point stands. That you have one thing inspired by something else, and then that should piggyback into something further. But for whatever reason, we're not really seeing that. One particular, one of the best examples of what could and should be, in my opinion, is you have like the original slashers from horror movies of the 70s and 80s. Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Pinhead, Leatherface, that sort of thing. And although there have been a few characters here and there that kind of scratch the surface, like none have really done that until you get to Art the Clown with the Terrifier series. Now, it's divisive. Not everyone likes it. I love it myself. So it does show that there's hope, right? And, when the MCU is good, it's really good. So there's that. But Terrifier is brand new. Came up from nothing. Purely word of mouth for the most part. Completely independent. And it's just a phenomenon, right? And we haven't had that kind of horror movie that big in a really long time. So there's always a possibility for these things to happen. There's always a possibility to get new people involved in these genres and these pop culture things that happen. I kind of feel like Uncharted, that movie missed the boat. Haven't seen it, but based upon the public response to it, I feel it was a missed opportunity. Whether or not I watch it and end up liking it is moot. It doesn't matter. Because it sounds like they're probably not going to make another one. Because it didn't make the money they wanted it to make. But it could have been, quote, the next Indiana Jones. And if they reboot Tomb Raider again, it could still be something along those lines. It doesn't have to be Indiana Jones. It doesn't have to be Star Wars. It doesn't have to be the Ghostbusters. But whatever it is that you're out there doing, it can hit a similar vibe and scratch the itch. And I'm hoping that we get more of that in our culture as time goes on. But I think that the odds are that much more against those things happening more than ever. So when something like a Terrifier comes along or other things that have kind of hit the way that they have, I think it's that much more notable, which is itself interesting too. Rollo says, I'm not well, but I made my peace, turn to God, help overcome his depression, and accept things how they are. Will positively enjoy the rest of the ride with you. I'm glad to hear that you're coming to a peace. Like, that is very important, and I'm grateful that you're still here. I'll put it that way. There was a time, not going too deep into things, as this is your personal life, and I don't want to go into it, but 2 years ago, there was a thought, there was an assumption that you wouldn't last the year. And you're still here. So that in and of itself is, I hesitate to say miraculous, but I think a lot of us were like, oh, cool, he's still around. That's awesome. So I'm glad that you are. And it's good to hear from you, brother. And you are loved. So, and it's just something that, in many ways, live streams like this, particularly in the collector community especially, but also in other communities too, I think. Whether you want to use the C word or not, I'm using it because it's easier to say out loud. But I feel like that's kind of replaced those school bus discussions, and it's replaced a lot of the bar side chats that I've had in time and in life. And it's not a bad thing per se, but it is very different. Okay, so I'm being corrected. Martin says that it has been nothing less than a miracle. Well, then I would agree, and I'm glad that you're here. And Lauren says that you've been on our mind. That's true. Yeah, because as soon as I noticed that you were around, I'm like, oh shit, good to know. Because there was a concern at one point that we wouldn't hear from you, but here you are, and we are hearing from you, and that's great. So thanks for that. I am going to wrap this up here. Basically saying that I don't expect people to lighten up on current culture. Is like, hey, your opinion's your opinion. You can have whatever opinion you want. But I hope that you will temper that opinion with the information and the perspective that I hope to have given you today. That you can't compare it one-to-one because there is no one-to-one. The reason that we feel that the 70s, 80s, and 90s were so special is because they were so special. Just by virtue of it being such a perfect mix at just the right time of these things that will probably never happen again. And when it does happen, it's even more rare, you know. So cherish the new memories that you have as much as you do the old ones. And I hope that these days bring you happiness and joy wherever you can find it. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you're feeling, no matter where you live, no matter anything. Find something positive every day. That's what I try to do. I try to smile. I try to laugh. Sometimes at the same time. You know? Just go looking for it. It'll find you. Cheers, guys. We'll see you next week.